We're going to do something different in today's Southwest Florida Reinvented. We want to celebrate Black History Month by telling a story you may not know. When a local city was created nearly 150 years ago, the founders proved you can do it a new way, a better way, a way that celebrates equality. There's a connection to history here in Punta Gorda that you don't always see in Southwest Florida.
Because our beginnings were very different from other southern towns.
Dr. Martha Beretta can trace her family history back to when this town started, and she can see its future. Her son, Jaha Cummings, is a city council member.
You can actually feel the 1890s to 1920s like in the air here.
In that 40 years, a group of African-American men helped create a city, and they became some of its most successful business owners. It was almost unheard of in post-Civil War America.
All the men who came here were men whose parents had been enslaved. And these men were able to come to Punta Gorda and see the products of their work.
Their story starts in a swamp. Sometime around 1883, Isaac Trabue bought land in the area and planned a small city in his name. He hired future Florida Governor Albert Gilchrist to survey the land, and Gilchrist brought along 15 men to do the work. They had to be skilled, intelligent men. 7 of them were African American.
They had to work together.
They couldn't hate.
They couldn't hate. You know, you got bears and alligators, so how can you hate? They had to be for each other.
She says that set the tone of equality in Punta Gorda. By 1886, Stan Smith, one of the original surveyors, was running the town's first church. A year later, a group of men, including 4 African Americans, voted and then signed the charter to make Punta Gorda a city. Among them was Obie Armstrong. He owned a hotel and grocery store, and this is important, he did it in downtown Punta Gorda, right next to the white business owners. George Brown started several businesses along the harbor and became one of the biggest employers of both black and white men. He was also one of the city's biggest landowners. He sold the county the land where they built the first courthouse. Today, there's a mural dedicated to him on the property. But to really appreciate what happened here, consider this. In 1885, Florida lawmakers passed a series of Jim Crow laws that made it nearly impossible for black men to vote.
126 African Americans were voters here. I'm talking about Jim Crow. They voted.
For a time, they also avoided the kind of large-scale segregation going on in the rest of the state. In 1894, the city of Palm Beach began moving African Americans from the Sticks neighborhood into shanty towns. More than 30 years later, African Americans in Tampa were living in condemned shacks in the red quarters. But in Punta Gorda, the white newspaper, the only newspaper, always referred to George Brown as Mr. Brown.
It was just an understanding that in order to make this happen, we couldn't buy into these things that may have been happening elsewhere.
There was not this presence of anger, a resentment of their good fortune.
In the Jim Crow South, it was about as equal as it could get. But Jim Crow laws were made to suppress. Benjamin Baker helped start the first school for African American children, but those children had to leave Punta Gorda for higher education. And to get jobs they wanted, they didn't come back.
Because of Jim Crow, they couldn't work in banks, so they did leave. They moved up north.
At one point in the 20s, 41% of the population here was African American. Today it's 3%, which is part of the reason Dr. Beretta runs the Blanchard House Museum of African American History. So stories like this will not be forgotten.
They went against some really tremendous odds and were able to wildly overcome them, and it's because they were unified in their goals and in their execution.
But people need to see each other as individuals, establish relationships, and work together for the common good. That's what happened here.
If you have a story of someone reinventing themselves that you'd like to see on Fox 4, go to my Facebook page, that's Chris Shaw Fox 4, and send me a message.
Awesome story, Chris.